Welcome back. Ladies and gentlemen, Pastor Max is at, I think you already know, but I'll just repeat it for your benefit if you didn't hear it earlier in the week, is at Faith Temple, Banning and Notre Dame, tonight only. So if you want to hear him while he's in the city, this will be your only opportunity. Again, it's Faith Temple, and it's Banning and Notre Dame tonight. Max, good to see you again.
Thanks. It's good being with you always.
How have you been?
Just great.
Hey.
And I've just come back from Poland.
Yes.
And I'm really excited about things that are happening in Poland and in the Soviet Union and all the East Bloc countries.
Now, you and I have just been talking over coffee, and we talked about this man Gorbachev.
Yeah.
And I really have to ask you, knowing how you interpret scriptures and how you read Revelation, and the interpretive way, pardon me, that you read Revelation. And I want to ask you about this man Gorbachev and the way that you may see that scriptures interpret him in history. Is he any kind of savior, do you think, at this point in time? And I simply mean that in earthly terms, you understand me.
Yes.
Or conversely, is he quite the opposite? Is it possible we're looking at an antichrist here?
He's a very complex man, and he's I think he's a very shrewd man, and he's a very smart man. But I also believe that he is a dangerous man. I don't trust Gorbachev, but I like him. His name in Russian means the man who handles the whip. Gorbachev, the man who handles the whip. And something I discovered in the Russian language, when you write his name, you don't write it G-O-R. You write it G-O-G. You've got to drop in a G because between O-R you can't have the G-O-R. You must add a G. Like in Norwegian, you drop in an H every once in a while in some words. Yeah. And so that would make his name G-O-G, Gog Gorbachev.
And of course that has biblical implications.
Very, very much so.
Yeah.
Where the Bible speaks about Gog, G-O-G, as being the chief prince of Magog, the area which is now the Soviet Union. Yeah. And this is the enemy of Israel. And so, and then on the other hand, you see him being brought up in the Orthodox Church. And now, apparently, God moving upon his heart. Married to a devout Marxist, and yet being in a Polish Roman Catholic Church recently.
Evidently with a mother who is of the Orthodox Christian persuasion.
Well, they say that she's a real believer, and now we hear rumblings that there's a possibility his brother is a Pentecostal minister. So a lot of stories are coming.
Oh, I had not heard that.
Yeah, a lot of stories are coming out. Yeah. So the man seems to be very complex, torn.
Yeah.
And yet, something that came to me recently
and intellectually very bright.
Very bright.
Yeah.
Realizing that communism is totally something for the past. It has failed totally. It's bankrupt in every area. Like it's bankrupt economically, ideologically. It's a bankrupt philosophy. It hasn't produced. So wanting to be a good Marxist, but he can't because the system has failed. Yeah. So he's torn. Knowing that there's something to this thing, God is there, being in America saying, well, Jesus Christ is the only person who has all the solutions to all the problems. I don't possess that skill, and yet saying there's no God.
Well, you know, now that you have said that, Max, last night on television, American television, I'm sorry.
Yes.
They went back at one point and brought forward from past history, 25 years, public statements by various American officials. Richard Nixon was one, President Kennedy was another, and Ronald Reagan was another, and so on. Statements made about the Soviet Union and what an evil philosophy is represented by Soviet communism. They started with black and white television and moved right forward up to the present day, including Ronald Reagan and George Bush and Mr. Gorbachev in front of the Statue of Liberty in New York Harbor. I have to tell you, that little sequence, Max, was stunning. It made you see very clearly what has happened in the last quarter of a century.
You know, many of the people of the East, like the ancient Eastern people, believed that anyone with a birthmark like his was someone sent from the gods. It's very significant in Eastern philosophy, this birthmark. It's something else about Gorbachev. He's a very striking personality. And if you go back in history, you'll find that they believe that a man like this is a very special person. His name, Michael, it's really like Michael, and which means Prince of God. So you see, the Bible speaks about this Gog, G-O-G, coming down, and although he is becoming friends with the Israelis, I learned that just recently he had a private meeting with one of the leading Arab leaders, and he promised him that although we're normalizing our relationships with Israel, I want to promise you, within 1 year, now this came to us through Norway, through the pipeline to Israel.
Okay.
I want to promise you that I'm going to do something so great within 1 year that all the Arab leaders will thank me. And you'll know that I'm the man that stands for the Arab nations. Well, you know what will happen if this is the truth? It'll be an invasion of Israel. And this has to be. He's drawn towards Israel. Is he the Gog of Ezekiel 38? I don't know. But one thing we know for sure, as he opens the door with perestroika, glasnost, and the new freedom, he's opening the door for the gospel. And next April, I'll be there preaching in Leningrad in a large auditorium seating 10,000 people.
Well, Max, that raises the whole question of media, of course, because when you say gospel, media carries the gospel of various kinds into areas where communication has been tightly regulated and people have not had access to new ideas, and certainly the Soviet Union was one of those places. And now they are getting access, and someone said last night on American television, you can't allow media to penetrate a regulated culture without forever changing that society. It'll never be the same afterward.
You know, one thing that was very, very, almost odd was when I was in Finland 5 years ago, I understood at that time that the Russians had sent some of their people into Sweden to check out and find out why there were more atheists in Sweden than in the Soviet Union. Why do you have more atheists in Sweden? Because you see, there's a tremendous revival in the Soviet Union. But the Swedish people, the state church being Lutheran, my old church, you know, they don't believe. So there's so much liberty that they don't believe. And because there's no liberty in the Soviet Union, and there a lot of the Christians have been tortured for years. As a matter of fact, Alexander Solzhenitsyn made the statement 3 or 4 years ago, when liberty does come and freedom does come to the Iron Curtain countries, he said, I believe that the greatest evangelists of all world history will come out of the Soviet Union. So now they realize that persecution against the Christians has helped the Christians, not hurt them.
No, probably has.
And there's a tremendous revival in the Soviet Union. And they tell me that even in our meetings in Poland just recently, I mean, the places were jammed and packed.
Now, Max, can you say this here on public media here in Canada, and it can be monitored and picked up by anybody, including the Russian embassy in Ottawa. And then you're going to go to Leningrad. You're not concerned about the way this may be taken?
Not at all, because see, there's such a change. Mikhail Gorbachev has brought this glass-nosed perestroika openness, and there are only 2 countries that will not listen to him, and that is East Germany and Romania. Now we're going in there too to speak in the churches, but in these other countries it's wide open, absolutely open. For instance, a year ago you couldn't have a public meeting in Russia. But now a friend of mine was telling me that a friend of his had been in Russia, and they were in a public meeting in a park, and one of the Christians, which they call stundis, which means kind of, you know, dummy, like the Christians were sort of called, it's a nickname for the Christians. One of these stundis, evangelicals, walked up to a KGB official in a public park and gave him a gospel tract. And he said, thank you. He said, you stundis, you believers, it's taken you 70 years and you finally won over godless communism. This could never have happened a year ago.
And a KGB officer said that.
A KGB officer said this. Another case, which was fantastic, and I wrote about this in my column in the Edmonton Sun, that there was another meeting in a public park, and a drunk man walked up to a stundi, or a believer, and began to slap him and kick him. Well, I mean, up to a year ago, a police officer seeing this would just stand there and watch. But a police officer saw this, walked up to the drunk man, grabbed him, shook him, threw him in the van, and protected the Christian. I mean, it's a total change. Do you know why? Look, Mikhail Gorbachev has said, and the leaders of communism in the Soviet Union, in China, and in other countries, even Mozambique, have said the best citizens are the Christians. The Christians look at the Christians in Poland. I mean, the evangelicals, they don't get drunk. They give a good day's work on the job. They don't beat their wife. They don't abuse their children. They don't have marches against the government. They're no problem. The Christians are the best citizens.
Max, thank you for coming in. Now, what time tonight?
7 o'clock.
Okay, and it's Faith Tabernacle.
Faith Temple, Banning and Notre Dame.
Banning and Notre Dame.
Yeah.
7 o'clock, in fact, is the only time that your followers can hear you speak.
This is it.
On this occasion, I mean.
And in the month of February, I believe I'll be going into India, where we'll have large crowds of over 100,000. So I wanted to pray. But pray for the Soviet Union. We're bringing in 100,000 books. 100,000 books into the Soviet Union.
Into the Soviet Union.
And Poland.
Will you take those through Leningrad?
And we'll take them right in through Poland, and we went in with
I see.
20,000 books.
Yeah.
They never even stopped us. They treated me like a king. I love the communists.
Isn't that terrific?
Can I say something else? Do you know that in Poland, the thing that really shook me, the evangelicals, the Pentecostals, they don't want Lech Walesa to win. They don't believe in solidarity. Do you know why? They said, we don't want to return to 1945 when the Roman Catholic Church dominated everything and we had no freedom. We'd prefer to have communism where they let us preach. So there's more freedom under communism.
Better go, George. I can't get him stopped. Max is at Faith Temple tonight at 7:30, and you can hear him at that time. Nice to see you again, Max.
God bless you.
Back in 2 minutes, right after this.